The European and African leaders met in Brussels for the 6th summit between these two partners. Africa and Europe want to build the foundations of a new partnership. The European Union wishes to remain the first multilateral partner of the African continent. In the eyes of the leaders, this renewed partnership must go beyond economic dossiers. There is also the question of education, of health, climate, and digital. In a way, it is about redesigning global governance and registering this partnership on the international stage. To discuss these questions, we are joined by the President of the European Council, Charles Michel. Hello, Charles Michel.
Hello.
Beside you is the President of Senegal and the Chairperson of the African Union, Macky Sall. Hello. Charles Michel, the first objective of this summit was to reshuffle the cards a little. Are you fully satisfied with what has been done over these 2 days in Brussels?
I am very satisfied because I have the conviction that during these few hours in Brussels, during these 2 days in Brussels, we've truly redesigned and renewed the partnership between Africa and Europe. We've changed the paradigm. And the preparation of the summit already displayed the desire for a common political will. How can we identify together the goals and challenges? Moreover, how can we identify together the best solutions with more pragmatism, while being more efficient, more practical? So these principles of mutual respect, mutual interest, these principles of regular evaluations ensure that we can really deliver on our commitments.
So are you happy?
I am happy because I felt an atmosphere. I really felt that the African and European leaders were committed, motivated, and mobilized in listening to each other. And it's important to listen to each other because it's the key to trust, to better understand the points of view of both sides, to better understand from the outset the points of view that are sometimes not spontaneously the same, where the bridges are, where the common paths are, so that when there are difficulties, because there can be some, we can see that we have the capacity to overcome the obstacle in an intelligent way.
Macky Sall, do you think it is possible to rebuild this partnership? Absolutely. As Charles said, first I would like to thank him for the good organization of the summit, but also for the way the summit was prepared. This has allowed us to achieve this result, which will be the starting point of this renewed and rethought partnership, but built on mutual respect, solidarity, and finally listening to each other, because often we were not listened to. We were just given recipes, solutions. I note this fundamental paradigm shift in the relationship, built on friendship, consideration, mutual listening, and search for common solutions, the co-construction of solutions. In addition, when we came to Brussels, of course, there were delicate subjects on which we had not yet finished negotiating. The question of energy transition, the climate transition, the questions of property rights in relation to vaccines. These are difficult subjects which we have more or less succeeded in fixing. Therefore, regarding the work method, it was a major innovation and it gave us greater efficiency and finally led to quite convincing results. Now there remains the implementation, on which we have also committed ourselves. Macky Sall, the management of the COVID pandemic has strained relations between the African Union and the European Union. There was Omicron and the decisions made in its wake. Now there is this pressing issue of lifting the vaccine patents. Clearly, you have not obtained satisfaction. Is this a failure? No, not at all. It is not at all a failure. I mean, when there are two opposing positions, we try to reach a compromise, a solution that could satisfy both parties. We are not in a Manichaean relationship, where it is yes or no. No. Already, to achieve the desired results, that is, to have at least 60% of vaccines produced in Africa, Europe has made efforts. First of all, the availability of vaccines on COVAX, whatever one may say. Already 150 million doses that have been given. Furthermore, Europe is committed to providing 400 million doses by the summer of 2022. That is the first step. However, we are saying that receiving the doses is not enough. We want to produce the doses in Africa. Within this context, there has been an extremely important exchange where European countries and Team Europe made a commitment with us, with the WHO, to transfer initially to 6 African countries, 6 hubs, the new technology of messenger RNA. And within this framework, it is important to discuss the subject of patents. the patents that some are saying should be suspended. That is one side. The others are saying we cannot question intellectual property. So what should we do? We have a pandemic. People are dying during this pandemic. We are going to, and we have given, a mandate to the two commissions, the European Union and the African Union, and the WTO will accompany us so that we can find a compromise. And the compromise is, first of all, the transfer of technology. Once we have the technology, it's easier to discuss with the person who has the patent, perhaps to improve the conditions, to reduce the costs, so that those who have the technology can reproduce on the continent. So this debate is postponed until April-May, and I think that we cannot say that it is a failure. On the contrary, it is a common will to reach a compromise, and I'm sure one will be found. Charles Michel, why has the EU not wanted to lift the patents? Don't you think this will accentuate the mistrust of your African partners?
We have the conviction that we share the exact same objective. European and African leaders want to have the capacity to develop vaccine production and the drug sector more generally on the African continent. That is the starting point. Secondly, we are well aware that the intellectual property is a powerful tool to promote innovation and research, so it's obviously essential to protect this aspect. Furthermore, we understand that when we produce medications or vaccines, there's a very important element, which is technology, the expertise and the regulatory capacity. We wanted to be extremely pragmatic. Why? Because these last months, rather than having an ideological debate without end, where two diametrically opposed positions would face off, we said, we're not going to wait. Right now, we're going to roll back our sleeves. I was in Dakar visiting the Pasteur Institute, whether in Senegal or in other African countries, to launch projects. We pushed the private sector to develop projects where there was a very, very strong political will. And this has given rise to the ability today to implement these technology transfers. And we are going further. We are now going to work together on a common African and European position that we can defend within the WHO and the WTO. And this means that it is a good example where the Federation of African and European political forces can push the world to find an intelligent solution. When we are hit by such a pandemic, we need to find the balance between intellectual property to guarantee innovation and making sure that we do not waste time and ensure that everywhere in the world has access to vaccines.
I have an investment question. The European Union is proposing 150 billion euros to Africa. Is this a sufficient amount to counter, let's say, the influence of China, of Russia? Is this the only possible answer?
I would like to correct one thing. There should be no misunderstanding. The will of the European Union is not at all to counter the influence of someone. It's to develop a positive project, a positive, intelligent, committed partnership. And why? Because we have a sincere will, because it's our mutual interest. We know that when Africa is doing well in terms of stability, development and prosperity, it's good for Europe. And in the same way, when Europe is doing well in terms of prosperity and stability, it's good for Africa. This is a first element that's important to underline and clarify. That is the sincerity of this commitment. Now on the amount. It's an unprecedented amount. Never have we been able to mobilize such funds. Why? Because we decided to think in terms of channeling public resources, the resources traditionally mobilized for this partnership, with a view to better channel private money, the private sector. This additional element relates to the new software described a few moments ago. We are going to look for what we call leverage. The European Investment Bank is becoming a major actor from the European point of view in order to develop these partnerships with our African partners. Moreover, when we are working with African leaders, I always make sure to bring along European bank experts in order to be well informed about the priorities of African countries in terms of investment, particularly in the infrastructure sector, for example.
Macky Sall, we know that Europe is reluctant to finance projects surrounding fossil fuels. And I know that you have been advocating for this. Does this mean that you will be looking for investors elsewhere? No. It must be said that at the end of this summit, we did reach a compromise with Europe on this essential issue, which is close to my heart because I'm against injustice. But what we wanted to do was unfair to Africa, that is to say the Africa which pollutes, which emits less than 3% of CO2, which suffers drastically from the consequences of climate change. Africa got told, no, you must stop all that is fossil fuel related. It is not realistic, it is not fair. But Africa is committed to the fight against climate change. On the Paris Agreement, in most African countries, people are committed to an energy mix, and we have adaptation policies underway. My country, for example, is at 31% clean energy, renewable energy. 31% renewable energy. Currently, there are not many countries that are at that level. But as we need to give electricity to 600 million Africans who do not have it yet, because there is a lack of electricity, we also need to develop industry in Africa to create jobs and added value. Are we just selling raw materials and buying manufactured goods? We need to industrialize the continent. We will do it in a low-carbon way, but we will do it with an energy that is able to be competitive for our economies. When achieved, at the same time, we will adapt and we will develop sustainable projects, such as the Great Green Wall in Africa, and everything that is clean energy and renewable energy. What comes back from the field is that these standards, these European criteria, are perhaps not suitable for Africa. Does this mean that the Union should review its criteria? Should it review the scope of the climate effort?
I see in this example that was explained by Macky Sall something very interesting, because Macky Sall is a formidable lawyer who handles well the objective and rational argumentation. And we remember that probably the trust between Macky Sall and myself has created the opportunity for months to exchange on this subject. And I understand very well, as do the other European leaders, that on the one hand, it's rather Europe, along with the other advanced economies, that have abused natural resources and that are at the root of the problem of global warming. So it's true that there is an injustice, and it would be unjust, when keeping in mind the transition that is necessary, to not be pragmatic with the realities of the African continent. At the beginning, there wasn't much enthusiasm at the European level to hear this message, because there is a radical nature, because we feel this climate emergency. It's the dialogue, it's the mutual listening, it's the change of software which allowed for many exchanges of information beforehand. We succeeded in agreeing on a text, which is the demonstration that there is a political will and trust is achieved through transparency, through a form of mutual loyalty.
So let's talk a little bit about the security issue, if you will. France has announced a coordinated withdrawal of Barkhane and Takuba. You reacted, saying that you were happy that this commitment was renewed. Concretely, what will we see in this region in the coming months? First of all, it is important to note that we had an extremely important exchange at the Élysée Palace the day before yesterday. Michel was there with the European and African leaders on the issue of security and the fight against terrorism. And during this debate, which is also a frank debate, where things are said clearly, bluntly, but with respect, it appears that Europe does not want to leave Africa alone to face terrorism. This is a good thing. We would like all the parts of the world to think like this, because if everyone reasoned like this, Africans would not face terrorism alone. When it came to terrorism in Afghanistan or Syria, global coalitions mobilized, thousands of billions of dollars were mobilized for 20 years in Afghanistan. Why is it that when it comes to Africa, we are told to deal with it on our own? However, there have been a few countries, France is one of them, who responded to Mali's call in 2013. Africans responded before the UN set up a Blue Helmet mission. Our different countries sent their soldiers for free. I remember my soldiers drove from Dakar to the northern part of Mali. The name will come back to me. And they drove 2.3 thousand kilometers to help Mali because it was one of our neighbors. This type of solidarity, we would like it to be global, and it is good that Europe has renewed this desire and this solidarity with Africa. This is why Europe told us, right now, in Mali, there are problems, there are situations and operational conditions that no longer permit us to maintain our mission on the ground. But we will coordinate our moves to remain in the Sahel, to remain in the zone, coordinate towards Niger, along with other countries who are coastal countries of the Gulf of Guinea. This is for the time being until things improve in Mali so that they can return. We cannot fight against terrorism in the Sahel without Mali. It is impossible. It is a massive territory of 1.2 million square kilometers. It shares its borders with 7 other countries: Algeria, Mauritania, Niger, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, Guinea, and Senegal. Mali is all this. It's such a massive space. It is impossible to fight terrorism and not be there. Now, I do understand there are circumstances now which I hope we will be able to overcome soon in order to return to fighting terrorism efficiently. Do the failures of the French Barkhane mission and the European Takuba mission call into question this format of intervention and could call into question other European interventions?
I disagree with your analysis because it's crucial to remember the starting point. The starting point was the threat of the total collapse of Mali, with implications for the entire region and beyond. And it's because sovereign states considered that it was useful to have the partnership of France and the European countries that the decision was taken to deploy in support to try and avoid what would have been a much more serious catastrophe than the current situation. Secondly, we are taking into consideration the evolution of the threat and the situation in Mali, which, as mentioned earlier, is causing difficulties. We hope we will be able to return as soon as possible to a more normalized form of cooperation with this country, which is an important country in the heart of the Sahel. But we're also adapting through the coordination that has been explained. We are also engaged in a full dialogue with African countries, taking into account, for example, the ACRO initiative and the importance of also taking into consideration the countries of the Gulf of Guinea, who had representatives at this meeting. Therefore, we had European and African countries at the table. It was an opportunity for a direct exchange, a joint analysis of the situation. And based on this joint analysis, we see how we can deploy in an operational manner once again. As Europeans, we try to deploy the most logical and useful means, following the analyses made by our African friends.
Charles Michel, 5 years ago in Abidjan, decisions were made regarding immigration issues, including putting an end to illegal trafficking. Libya was discussed, for example, and strengthening partnerships there. We realize that there are still migrants at the start of their journeys and that there are still sea rescues. Nothing seems to have changed between 2017 and now.
Firstly, it's certain that the question of migration is a politically sensitive issue in Europe, and probably also in Africa. And it was important to have this dialogue. I remember in preparation for this summit, some friends on both the African and European sides were a little apprehensive about this debate. A little apprehensive that the debate would be the scene of a great confrontation, a big dispute, the Africans versus the Europeans. We really wanted to listen to each other and to have an intelligent and nuanced look at this subject. We understand as Europeans that one of the first challenges for migration is intra-African. There is an intra-African debate. How can we tackle this situation? By mobilizing, as has been decided, very concrete projects of massive investments in vocational training, apprenticeships, to ensure that these African youths have optimistic prospects. Secondly, how can we efficiently fight together the criminals that use and abuse this human distress in a somewhat cynical way? Here we have joint interests because we have the same understanding of human dignity, and therefore we want to act together in relation to this. Then, within a more global framework, we must look at how we can cooperate in terms of return and the readmission for those who do not meet the conditions. I also want to point out, we have made it clear that if we are firm, if we want to be firm in combating irregular and illegal migration, we must also offer regular and legal channels for migration. You see, on a subject like this, as soon as we bring back rationality, I think we're able to look at how we can find solutions together with serenity and intelligence. Thank you both.
Macky Sall, President of Senegal and Chairperson of the African Union, thank you for answering our questions. Thank you very much.